I used to think I knew the exact sound my phone made when everything was going to be okay. It was the soft buzz on my nightstand, the name lighting up the screen, the immediate relief before I even answered. I didn't have to think about what I'd say. I'd just grab it and breathe again. That was him, my best friend, the first person I called when something went wrong, the person who knew my voice well enough to hear the cracks before I did. The night everything started to unravel, I called him the same way I always had, automatic, desperate. Sitting on the edge of my bed with my knees pulled to my chest, staring at the dent in the carpet where my suitcase usually lived, untouched for months. I remember thinking how stupid it was that a piece of carpet could feel like proof of a life I was barely holding together. I didn't even say hello when he answered. I just said her name, my girlfriend's name. He sighed, like he already knew where the story was going, and maybe that should have been my first clue, but I was too wrapped up in my own spiral to notice. He told me to slow down, to breathe, to start from the beginning. He always said that, like he was anchoring me to something solid. We'd been together for 3 years. Not a dramatic relationship, not the kind people write poems about, but steady in a way that felt adult and earned. Shared groceries, Sunday morning coffee runs, inside jokes that didn't make sense to anyone else. I thought that was what love turned into when it stopped being loud, comfortable, predictable, safe. Lately, though, she'd been distant. Not cold, just elsewhere. Laughing at her phone and then locking it when I walked into the room, coming home later than usual, saying work was hectic, that she was tired, that it wasn't about me. I wanted to believe her because believing her meant my life didn't have to change. So when I called my best friend that night, I was looking for confirmation. I wanted him to tell me I was overthinking it, that couples go through phases, that I was being paranoid. He did exactly that. He told me I was spiraling. He told me she loved me. He told me I had a habit of assuming the worst when things felt out of my control. He reminded me of past fights that blew over, past scares that turned into nothing. He spoke calmly, confidently, like someone who had nothing to hide. I hung up feeling lighter, embarrassed even. I remember laughing at myself in the mirror, wiping my face, thinking I owed him a drink for talking me down again. That was our dynamic. I melted down, he stabilized me. I trusted him with my rawest thoughts, my ugliest fears. That trust had been built over years. Late nights in college apartments that smelled like beer and burned pizza. Long drives with the windows down, arguing about music and girls and what kind of lives we thought we'd have by 30. He knew every version of me. The broke one, the heartbroken one, the one who thought love was supposed to hurt a little. He was there when I met her, teased me for being nervous before our first date, high-fived me when I told him she kissed me outside the bar. He watched our relationship grow from the sidelines, offering commentary like a sportscaster who thought he was neutral. Looking back, I replay moments that felt normal then but itch now. The way he'd text her directly instead of going through me. The way he always defended her during our disagreements, even when I didn't ask him to. The way she lit up around him in a different way, a looser way. I told myself it was because he was easy. Everyone loved him. He had that effect. A few weeks after that call, things got worse between her and me. Small fights turned into silences that stretched for days. She'd sit next to me on the couch, scrolling through her phone while the TV played something neither of us was watching. I'd try to start conversations and feel like I was talking through glass. Every time I felt that familiar panic rising, I called him. Sometimes from my car, parked a block away because I didn't want her to hear my voice shake. Sometimes from the bathroom with the shower running. He was always available, always patient. There was one night I remember especially clearly. It was raining hard, the kind that makes the streetlights blur. We'd fought about nothing and everything. She'd gone to bed without saying goodnight. I sat in my car and called him, knuckles white on the steering wheel. I told him I was scared she was slipping away, that I felt invisible, that I didn't recognize my own relationship anymore. I asked him point blank if he thought she could be cheating on me. There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. He laughed softly and said no. Said she wasn't that kind of person. Said I was projecting my anxiety onto her. Said I needed to stop interrogating her before I pushed her away for good. I apologized to him for even asking. I remember that clearly. I felt ashamed for doubting her, for doubting us, for doubting the people I loved most. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't crash through the door. It rearranges the furniture while you're asleep. It makes you question your own memory. It turns reassurance into a weapon.
The first real crack came on an ordinary Tuesday. I was at work when my phone buzzed with a message from her. Just one sentence. "We need to talk tonight." I stared at it longer than I should have. My chest tightened, that familiar pressure. I forwarded the message to him without thinking. He replied almost immediately. "You're going to be fine. Let me know how it goes." That night, she sat across from me at our kitchen table. The overhead light was too bright. Everything felt exposed. She couldn't look at me. She talked about feeling lost, about needing space, about not knowing who she was anymore. All the phrases people use when they're already halfway out the door. I asked if there was someone else. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone braver. She said no. She said this was about her, not me. She said she loved me, but didn't know if she was in love with me anymore. After she went to bed, I sat there alone, staring at the wood grain on the table, feeling hollowed out. I called him, again. He told me breakups don't always mean cheating. He told me to give her space. He told me to be strong, to not beg, to not panic. He told me he was proud of how I handled it. I cried after we hung up, deep, quiet sobs that made my chest ache. I didn't realize until later that the reason I was crying felt so tangled. I thought it was because I was losing her. I didn't know yet that the person I was leaning on was already slipping his hand off my back. The realization didn't hit all at once. It came in fragments. A notification on her phone that I wasn't supposed to see. A name I recognized. His name. A late-night message that didn't make sense in isolation, but screamed in context. I stood there in our bedroom holding her phone, my hand shaking, my ears ringing. The room felt too small, too quiet. I felt stupid, naive, like the punchline to a joke everyone else was in on. And the cruelest part was the instinct that followed, the reflex, the muscle memory. I picked up my phone to call the one person who always made things make sense. Then I realized he was the reason my chest hurt in the first place. I didn't confront either of them right away. That's the part I'm most ashamed of.
I stood there in the bedroom with her phone on my hand, staring at his name on the screen like it might rearrange itself into something harmless if I waited long enough. The message wasn't explicit. It didn't need to be. It was casual in the way only intimacy allows. A joke that required shared context. Did you get home safe? Sent at a time no one should have been thinking about anyone else's safety except the person sleeping beside them. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I lay down next to her and stared at the ceiling until the early light started leaking through the blinds. She breathed evenly, peacefully. I didn't sleep at all. The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. I answered emails. I nodded in meetings. I laughed at a coworker's joke about the coffee being terrible. Inside, everything felt brittle. Like if someone asked me one real question, I'd shatter in the middle of the office. He texted me around noon. Just checking in. How'd it go last night? I stared at that message longer than I'd stared at anything in my life. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to ask him how long. I wanted to ask him why. Instead, I typed back, "She says she needs space." And then I added, "I'm not doing great." He responded immediately, "I'm here if you need me." That line had been my lifeline for years. Seeing it then felt like swallowing glass. Over the next few days, I became a quiet observer in my own life. I watched her move through the apartment differently, lighter somehow, like she'd already stepped out of a heavy coat she'd been pretending not to feel. I watched myself become suspicious of every vibration, every locked screen, every smile that didn't include me. And I watched him carefully for the first time ever. I replayed conversations in my head, hearing new tones and old words, the pauses I'd ignored, the advice that now felt like direction instead of support. It was like realizing a song you loved had been mocking you the entire time, and you just hadn't known the language. One night she said she was going to stay at a friend's place to get some space. She didn't specify which friend. She didn't have to. I nodded like I understood, like I was being mature about it. As soon as the door closed behind her, I sat on the couch and let my head fall into my hands. I didn't call him. That alone felt wrong. My phone sat beside me, silent, like it was offended. I realized how conditioned I'd become to running to him with every emotional emergency, how I'd outsourced my instincts to someone else's voice. Around midnight, I broke. I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't know where I was going at first. My body just moved. At some point, I realized I was headed towards his place. That realization hit me like cold water. I parked down the street, heart pounding, telling myself I was being crazy, telling myself I was spiraling again, just like he always said.
I was about to turn the car around when I saw her car. It was unmistakable. Same dent in the rear bumper. Same stupid sticker she refused to peel off. Parked right in front of his building. I sat there with the engine running, hands locked on the wheel, watching the light in his living room window. I don't know how long I stayed like that. 10 minutes, an hour. Time did something strange. Eventually the light went off. I drove home numb. No tears, no yelling. Just this hollow, echoing quiet inside me that felt worse than pain. Pain at least proves you're still connected to something. The confrontation didn't happen until the next day. I asked her to sit down. She knew. The moment I said her name, she knew. Her shoulders dropped. She didn't deny it, not even for a second. She said it started as talking. She said she didn't plan for it to happen. She said she didn't mean to hurt me. All the classics. I barely heard her. My mind was stuck on one detail. How long? She hesitated. Then she said a few months. A few months. While I'd been calling him crying. While he'd been telling me to trust her. While he'd been telling me I was imagining things. I asked her if he knew how much I leaned on him. She looked away. That answer was everything. I didn't yell. That surprised both of us. I felt detached, like I was watching myself from across the room. I told her I knew about the messages. I told her I saw her car. I told her we were done. She cried then, real tears, reached for me. I stepped back. After she left, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and finally let it hit me. Not just that she cheated, but that the person I trusted most had been guiding me straight into it. That my safe place had been an illusion. He called me that night. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. The next day, he showed up at my door. I hadn't told him what I knew. I don't think he realized yet that the ground had shifted. He looked concerned, supportive, familiar. I let him talk. He asked how I was holding up. He said he'd heard she'd stayed at a friend's place. He said he was worried about me. Finally, I asked him one question. I kept my voice steady. Is there anything you want to tell me? He froze. Just for a second. Barely perceptible. But I saw it. He tried to play dumb. Said he didn't know what I meant. I told him I saw her car. I told him I read the messages. I told him I knew it had been going on for months. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. He didn't deny it. He didn't apologize right away either. He just looked tired, like he'd been carrying this weight longer than I had. He said he never meant for it to happen. He said feelings developed. He said he was confused. He said he was scared to lose me. That last one almost made me laugh. I asked him how could he listen to me break down over her and not say anything. I asked him how could he let me doubt my own instincts while he was sleeping with her. I asked him who he thought he was protecting. He didn't have good answers. He had excuses. He had regret. He had that same calm tone he used to talk me off ledges. This time it sounded rehearsed. I told him to leave. After he walked out, I realized something else had been taken from me. Not just my relationship, not just my best friend, but my sense of reality. I didn't know who I was with the voices I trusted narrating my life. The days that followed blurred together. I avoided places we used to go. I ignored messages from mutual friends. I sat alone with my thoughts for the first time in years. And in that quiet, I started hearing my own voice again. It was shaky, angry, hurt, but it was mine. I didn't know yet how deep this betrayal went. I didn't know how much more there was to uncover. I only knew that the two people I'd built my emotional home around had been sharing a space I was never invited into. And the worst part was realizing how carefully they'd made sure I stayed blind. I thought the worst part would be the confrontation, the moment where everything ugly finally got dragged into the light. I was wrong. That part was almost clean compared to what came after. The real damage settled in quietly, in the days when there was no one left to yell at, and nothing left to uncover that could shock me more than what I already knew. Or so I thought. The first week after everything blew up, my phone was mostly silent. A few texts from coworkers checking in.
A couple vague messages from mutual friends asking if I was okay without asking why I wasn't. I ignored most of them. I wasn't ready to narrate my own collapse yet. I didn't hear from him at all. Not an apology text, not a drunken late-night call, nothing. That silence felt intentional, like he was giving me space, the way he always advised me to give other people space. The irony wasn't lost on me. I started sleeping on the couch. The bedroom felt haunted. Every corner of the apartment carried an echo of something I'd believed in. I kept replaying conversations, but now I was digging deeper, past the obvious lies, past the surface-level betrayal. I kept thinking about how much he knew. He knew my childhood stuff, the abandonment issues I joked about but never really laughed at, the way I spiraled when I felt replaced, the way betrayal didn't just hurt me, it rewired me. He knew exactly where I was weakest, and he stepped right there. That realization changed the flavor of everything. It wasn't just that he slept with my girlfriend. It was that he weaponized intimacy. He sat on the phone with me while I cried and adjusted his words to keep me calm, compliant, unaware. He wasn't just lying. He was managing me. That thought made my stomach turn. A few days later, I got a message from her. Just my name. No apology, no explanation. I didn't respond. I blocked her number instead. It felt dramatic, but I needed something firm, something final. I needed a line that couldn't be blurred. That night, I finally told someone else what happened. Another friend, not as close, someone who didn't know all my soft spots. Saying it out loud felt surreal, like I was telling someone else's story. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then he said, "Man, I didn't want to be the one to tell you." My heart dropped. I asked him what he meant. He hesitated, then admitted he'd noticed things months ago. The way they'd disappear at parties, the way they'd text each other constantly. He said he didn't know for sure, but he suspected. He assumed I knew, or that if I didn't, it wasn't his place. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time after that. That was the moment the story shifted in my head. It stopped being about two people betraying me and started being about how long I'd been the last one to know. How many people might have seen me walking around confident and clueless, defending my relationship, praising my best friend, while the truth sat right there in plain sight. I felt exposed, humiliated, like my entire social world had been one big inside joke, and I was the punchline. A week later, he finally reached out. A long message, apologetic, emotional, full of words like mistake and confusion and self-loathing. He said he missed me. He said losing my friendship hurt more than anything. That part made me angry in a way I hadn't felt yet, because even then he was centering himself, his loss, his pain, his regret. Like my role in all of this was still to absorb, to reassure, to be the steady one. I didn't reply. He showed up again a few days after that. I don't know how he knew I'd be home. Maybe he guessed. Maybe he never stopped paying attention. When I opened the door and saw him, something in my chest went cold. Not hot, not explosive, just cold. The familiarity was gone. He looked like a stranger wearing someone else's face. He started talking immediately, apologizing, explaining, saying he hated himself for what he'd done, saying he'd ended things with her, saying he knew he didn't deserve forgiveness. I let him talk. I wanted to hear it all this time. I wanted to see if there was anything he could say that would make me feel less stupid, less erased. There wasn't. I asked him one question that had been burning in my head. "Did you ever feel bad while I was calling you?" He went quiet. His eyes dropped. He nodded. That answer hurt more than if he'd said no. Because it meant he knew. He knew exactly what he was doing. And he did it anyway. I told him I didn't want him in my life anymore. Not as a punishment, not as revenge, just as a boundary. I told him the version of me that trusted him didn't exist anymore, and I wasn't interested in pretending it did. He cried. I didn't. After he left, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't devastated anymore. I was angry, yes. Sad, yes. But beneath all that, there was clarity. Painful clarity, but clarity all the same. I started noticing things about myself I hadn't before. How often I deferred to him. How I'd let his confidence override my intuition. How I'd learned to doubt my own perceptions because he was always so sure. That scared me more than the cheating, because it meant this wasn't just a bad thing that happened to me. It was a pattern I'd participated in, a dynamic I'd allowed. The weeks turned into a month. I changed routines. New gym, new coffee place. I took long walks just to feel like I was moving somewhere, even if I didn't know where yet.
Sometimes I'd reach for my phone instinctively, ready to text him something stupid or funny or mundane. Every time, I stopped myself. That urge faded slowly, like a muscle learning it wasn't needed anymore. One night, I ran into her by accident at a grocery store. We stood in the same aisle, staring at the same shelf of cereal like it was a standoff. She looked thinner, tired. She opened her mouth like she wanted to say something. I nodded once and walked away. That was it. No closure speech, no dramatic exchange, just two people who had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. On the drive home, I realized I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was just done. But there was still one thing I hadn't fully faced yet. One question that kept circling in my mind late at night. How long had he been replacing me in her life while pretending to protect me in mine? And what else had I missed while I was busy trusting him with my pain? The last thing to fall apart wasn't loud. It didn't come with a confrontation or a shocking text or a late-night knock at the door. It came quietly, on a random afternoon, while I was sitting alone in my apartment scrolling through old photos I hadn't deleted yet. Photos are liars. They flatten time. They make everything look stable, intentional, real. There we were at a friend's birthday party, her arm around my waist, his arm slung casually over my shoulder from the other side. 3 people smiling like nothing in the world could touch us. I stared at that photo for a long time, and something finally clicked in a way it hadn't before. He hadn't just betrayed me in secret, he'd been standing right next to me while he did it. That realization hurt in a different way. Not sharp, not explosive. It was heavier, like grief settling into your bones. I started remembering moments I dismissed at the time, the way he'd always sit next to her when we were all out, the way he'd make eye contact with her during stories I was telling, the inside jokes that didn't include me, but that I laughed at anyway because I trusted them. Trust is a powerful blindfold. I thought about how often I'd handed my emotional steering wheel over to him, how I'd call him before making decisions, before confronting things, before listening to myself. He wasn't just my best friend. He was my compass, and he'd been pointing me in the wrong direction the entire time. That's the part that stayed with me. The cheating was painful. The lies were humiliating.
But realizing how deeply I'd been manipulated without even noticing rewrote how I saw myself. I wasn't just betrayed. I'd been quietly erased from my own instincts. For a while, that thought scared me. I worried I was broken, that I'd never trust anyone again, that I'd second-guess every friendship, every relationship, every piece of advice offered with a calm voice and a concerned look. But slowly, something else happened. Without him around, my life got quieter. Not empty, quieter. There was no one to immediately text when something went wrong, no voice jumping in to explain my feelings back to me. At first, that felt like free-falling. Then it started to feel like standing on my own feet. I made small decisions without consulting anyone. I trusted my reactions again. If something felt off, I didn't rush to explain it away. I let it exist. That was new. One night, a mutual friend invited me out for drinks. I almost said no out of habit, then realized I didn't actually owe anyone my absence. I went. People were careful around me at first. Conversations stalled when I walked up. I could feel the unspoken knowledge hanging in the air. Eventually, someone asked how I was doing. I told the truth, better than I thought I'd be. And I was. Not healed, not whole, but steadier. A couple of people told me things that night. Small comments, half confessions. How they'd always thought his closeness with her was strange. How they'd noticed him getting defensive whenever someone joked about it. No one had proof, no one wanted to be the one to accuse. I didn't get angry, I already knew how this worked. Silence isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it's fear. Sometimes it's convenience. I left early and drove home with the windows down, feeling lighter than I had in months. A few weeks later, I ran into him again, completely unplanned, a gas station off the highway. He was standing by his car when I pulled in, and for a second I considered driving away. Then I realized I didn't need to. He saw me and froze, like he wasn't sure which version of me he was about to get. The desperate one, the angry one, the forgiving one, none of those showed up. We exchanged a brief nod, nothing more. No conversation, no tension, just acknowledgement. As I walked back to my car, I felt something loosen inside my chest. Not relief, closure isn't that neat. It was more like confirmation. He didn't have power over me anymore. The story was finished, even if the scars weren't. Later that night, I thought about how long he'd been the first person I called, how many tears he'd heard, how many moments of doubt he'd guided. I realized something uncomfortable but important. He wasn't the reason I survived those moments. I was. He didn't calm me down. I calmed down. He didn't keep me together. I did.
I just gave him credit because it felt safer than trusting myself. That realization didn't erase the past, but it changed how I carried it. I stopped framing myself as someone who'd been foolish. I started seeing myself as someone who'd been open, someone who loved deeply, someone who believed in loyalty because he lived by it. That wasn't weakness, it was just misplaced faith. Months passed. The apartment started to feel like mine again. I rearranged furniture, got rid of things that reminded me of them, built new routines that didn't orbit around shared history. Sometimes late at night, the old reflex would still hit. Something would go wrong or something would go right, and my hand would twitch toward my phone. The urge to call him faded slower than I expected, but it did fade. The last time I thought about calling him, I stopped and asked myself what I'd actually be looking for. Reassurance, validation, permission to feel what I was already feeling. I gave it to myself instead. I don't know what happened between them after everything ended. I don't ask, I don't check. That chapter isn't mine anymore. Whatever version of each other they found, it was built on something that didn't include me, and that's exactly where it belongs. What I know is this: the person I trusted most became the source of my deepest pain, and I lived through it anyway. I learned that betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from the voice you run to when you're scared. Sometimes the person who dries your tears is the reason they're falling. And sometimes the most important call you stop making is the one that teaches you how to stand on your own.